From To Keto LLC, it's Keto Woman Podcast with Daisy Brackenhall.
Hello, Keto Lovelies. I'm Daisy Brackenhall, and I've spent most of my life struggling with my weight and confidence, and have always had a difficult relationship with food. Even when I finally got to my target weight, after weight loss surgery and eating low carb, I couldn't maintain it and I was miserable. Keto has given me the freedom to fall in love with food again, without the constant gain, loss, guilt, virtue cycle of before. Health and happiness is where it's at now, running on fat. Welcome to the Keto Woman Podcast. Each week I'll be chatting to inspirational women, maybe even the odd man, to discover the secrets to their success so that I can share them with you. So what is keto? Keto is a way of eating that enables you to switch your body's main fuel source from sugar to fat. Who doesn't want to be a fat burner, right? But how do we achieve this? A great place to start is by keeping carbs to 20 grams or less per day. So things like leafy greens and above ground vegetables, plus some nuts and seeds and the incidental carbs you find in things like dairy. Moderate protein scaled to your lean body mass, and then fat to satiety. Once you're in the swing of things, you can tweak it to suit you. Make your own personalised keto. I'll be asking my guest each week what their keto looks like to show you just how flexible and fabulous this way of eating can be. I'm not a doctor, and most of my guests won't be either, so we can't give you medical advice. It's always best to work with your own doctor because they know you and your medical history, and so have access to the bigger picture. Thank you, Jennifer Kleiman, for supporting me in this podcast by making a pledge at my Patreon page. Do you want to hear your name here at the top of the show? Are you enjoying this podcast and would like to help me make more episodes? Then head over to my Patreon page at patreon.com/KetoWoman, or hit the support button on the Keto Woman Podcast website. It means a great deal to me, and you will get to headline the show just like Jennifer did today. This week's returning extraordinary woman is Carrie Brown. Carrie is an ex-professional pastry chef, turned cookbook author, recipe developer, freelance photographer with a crazy 4-country, 3-continent spanning resume, which includes such things as a chocolate TV show, a chocolate cookbook, and making pastries for the Queen of England. She trained at the National Bakery School in London and has now turned her pastry chef talents to creating scrumptious keto low-carb food to help the world eat smarter, live better, and put the healthy back into healthy. She has published 5 cookbooks and shares her tales of food, travel and adventure from her splendid single life in the sane lane, as well as her trials and triumphs with bipolar disorder, adrenal fatigue, Lyme disease, a massive E. coli infection, a myriad of food sensitivities, and her journey back to slim and vibrant on her blog carriebrown.com. Carrie's keto buddies say of her, Carrie can often be found in the kitchen surrounded by her 4-legged friends, concocting, devising, developing and figuring out how to make the impossible very possible and affordable. And we love her for it. Carrie also shares her love, skills, passion for deliciously healthy food and humour in a Facebook group, The Keto Kitchen with Carrie Brown, as well as bouncing around all the usual social media platforms as The Real Carrie Brown. It was great to get Carrie back on the podcast to hear all about her latest health discoveries and battles. Once again, she comes out on top, of course, with the help of a few of her friends. Watch out for more appearances soon from my wonderful fellow Brit. Welcome back to the Keto Woman Podcast. It's great to have you here with us again today. Carrie Brown, hello.
Hello. And my chum in France that talks like I do.
Talks like what you do. It's nice, isn't it? It feels homely to hear the same accent.
We've actually been chatting for 3 hours, so I might be sounding extra British right now because that's what normally happens when I talk to some British people. I get more British, so I'll start talking about rubbish.
Oh, it's nice. Everyone likes our accents, so we're good. I'm sitting here watching, a little bit jealous. Carrie's eating her lovely high-fat Peak yogurt.
Yum! I'm Mimi from Peak Yogurt, who we love. Mimi was telling me that there's like 14 billion good bugs in each pot. So I'm stocking up. I'm repopulating myself.
Nice. As well as what percentage fat is it? It's really nice and high, isn't it?
It's 17% fat. It's super, super creamy. And if I hadn't eaten it all, I could have showed you how the spoon stands up in it because it's so thick. So each pot has, which is 5 ounces, so it's 5 ounce serving, 24 grams of fat, 8 grams of protein, 4 grams of total carbs. But the reason that we all love this Peak yogurt so much, one is because the high level of fat, but also they add no sugar to this at all. And the way they did that was they use a very, very mild culture so that they don't have to add sugar to counteract the tartness of the cultured milk.
I see.
So that's how they get away with adding no sugar, and it's the flavour is just, it's beautiful.
Because that does seem quite low. That seems lower than, I mean, your typical, the best one that you can normally find is a full fat Greek yogurt, isn't it? And that's sort of 3 to 4%.
Yep.
It sounds like it's a bit lower than that. So that's pretty good going.
Yep, it is. So, but it's also a lot less tart than Greek yogurt, and a lot of people struggle with Greek yogurt because it is so tangy, but this is very mild and it's very lovely and it's very fatty and it's very thick and it's just very everything good.
I might even like that because I don't really like yogurt. I use it sometimes with savoury things. Like I like it if you've made like a really spicy curry or a spicy keto chili or something, and then I quite like dumping some yogurt on it to cool it down. But I wouldn't just eat a pot of yogurt like that. So maybe I would like that one.
But for people, well, maybe people listening don't know that I'm a pastry chef. So I do have a little bit of food knowledge. And if you don't like yogurt, what you can do is just add a little bit of salt and it'll take the tang away because salt is magical. So salt will counteract the tang and you'll be left with something that is like sour cream in taste. Only you get all the yogurty goodness, but you don't get the tang. So just add a little bit of salt, stir it in, taste it, a little bit more salt until you can no longer taste that tang.
Interesting. See, I love talking to you. Learn something new.
Salt is magical. Salt will also counteract bitter if you have something that's bitter. So that's why, people put butter in their coffee. They like coffee more because the salt in the butter neutralizes any bitter notes in the coffee, and so buttered coffee made using salted butter will taste less bitter and smoother and more mellow, and it's the salt that does that.
Yes, I have heard that before. I have been advised if my coffee is bitter to add a bit of salt. So yes, interesting thing though, isn't it?
So if your coffee's bitter, add a bit of salt, love.
Because that seems crazy. That's like crazy talk. Why would you put salt in coffee? But yes, does seem to work. Magical substance. So yes.
I'm here again. Why am I here again?
Well, we want to hear about all the interesting things that have been happening. We heard all about your bipolar story last time, which I'm sure blew everyone else away. It certainly blows me away when I hear it. But all sorts of other weird and not very wonderful things have been happening to you. So I'd like to hear about that.
I appear the universe seems to have made me the poster child for getting all the things that cannot be cured by keto alone. So bipolar being one of them in my case, and just to reiterate, I'm not suggesting for 1 second that everybody's bipolar will be cured by the same method that I used. I am certain that the symptoms that we call bipolar can be caused by different things going awry. So not everybody is going to get the same relief as I did by doing the exact same things that I did to put mine on hold. And I think the same is true for all the things we're going to talk about today. But I do think that my body seems to have this magical ability to get all the things that Western medical struggles with fixing and all the things that cannot just be cured by keto. I seem to get them. And whether that's because the universe knows I'm going to get on a soapbox and talk about it a lot afterwards, I don't know. But there it is. So I have been the recipient, let's say, of some rather alarming infections is probably the best word to use. But where do you want to start?
Well, what led you to try and figure out what was wrong? I mean, presumably you found yourself in a place where, things weren't right. So, how were you feeling, and how did you stumble upon the right people to help you fix it?
So I've been in the States for nearly 18 years, and for 17 and a half of those years, I was living in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle. And then almost a year ago, I randomly vacationed to Connecticut. And while I was here eating turkey, I decided that I was going to move here from Seattle. So I spent Thanksgiving here. I flew back to Seattle. I sold my house. I packed up the contents and my cats, and I drove across the top of America in midwinter, like you do, and arrived in Connecticut. And it was actually about a week or 10 days after I arrived in Connecticut, that this glorious new life, I started to become ill. I started to get, my migraines came back. So I was getting migraine, which I hadn't had a migraine for a good 5 months at that point. And before that, they weren't very common. I didn't get them a ton. But about 10 days after I moved to Connecticut, I suddenly started getting migraines. I was getting them probably every other day, and they would take me out for a whole day. So I was losing probably 50% of my time. I also got this really, really weird neck pain. I started to become really, really nauseous, which is very annoying, because it makes you not want to eat anything. And, when you stop eating for non-fasting reasons, that's never a good thing. I also became chronically fatigued. I had no energy at all. I would drag myself out of bed in the morning, which took a phenomenal amount of effort. By 9 o'clock in the morning, I would literally be so tired I would be face planting on my desk. So I had chronic fatigue, but I couldn't sleep. If I managed to get 4 hours of sleep a night, that was a miracle. So I had a lot of trouble falling asleep. Once I got asleep, I never went more than 4 hours before I was awake again. But when I woke up, I was exhausted. So there was all of these weird things going on. I got a skin rash, which was getting progressively worse, and then really weird stuff like for 2 years, and I attribute this to keto. For 2 years, I had no body odor, so no BO. So literally, I had been able to stop using antiperspirant. I could actually go a whole week without washing my hair, and it still looked like I just had a shower. Whereas before keto, it had been like every day. If I didn't wash my hair every day, it was like, super lank, and because I've got very fine straight hair. And then after keto, after I had been on keto for about a year, I could literally go days between washing my hair, and it still looked gorgeous. And so my body odor went away. My feet didn't stink anymore. And so all these weird things, which was fabulous.
Nice and clean from the inside out.
Right? So, but then after I moved to Connecticut, my migraines came back, the chronic fatigue, the neck pain, the nausea, the couldn't sleep, all of this stuff. And then all of a sudden, one day I woke up and the BO was back. And that was the point at which I knew that something must have fundamentally gone sideways, because suddenly I have body odor again. My feet, I have this pair of Converse, which I have worn with no socks forever, and they didn't stink at all because I didn't have any body odor. All of a sudden, my shoes are stinking, I got stinky armpits, and I'm like, and my hair was also back to that. If I didn't wash it at least every other day, it was just lank and dirty and nasty. And so that was at the point where I was like, something has gone fundamentally wrong here. So I started trying to work out what it was. I think it was natural to assume that it was something to do with Connecticut. It actually wasn't, as it turns out. But at the time, I'm just like moved here, and my whole body went wonky. So I started looking at, okay, what's changed? So I started looking at allergies. There's different trees here. The air's different. And I moved. The home I bought here is, as Daisy can attest because she's been here, it's in the middle of nowhere.
It really is. Yeah.
In a forest. So, I've got livestock, there's coyotes and bears and mice and I have a herd of wild turkeys and there's deer. And so there's animals and things that bring things with them. So, and of course, all the trees here are different and the grass here is different and the air is different. So I started looking at, am I having an allergic reaction? Is there something in my new house? Is it built with something that's setting all these weird responses off? Are my migraines an allergic reaction? So I started investigating all of that, came up with nothing. So, and I was getting progressively iller. I was feeling worse. I was able to function less and less as the days went by. So I was losing probably at least 50% of my time. I literally couldn't function, and it was getting worse. So then I started doing things to try and help me sleep. So, you get the blocking curtains and the, all the things that we're told to do, and nothing. I could not get to sleep. And so then I started looking at, because of my past bipolar and the fact that I have to take methylated B vitamins. So then I was like, okay, one thing I know about MTHFR is that you can become over-methylated. So you can take too many Bs, you can be over-methylating or you can be under-methylating, and there's symptoms for both, and often over-methylation feels worse than under-methylation. So then I started looking at that and going, okay, am I feeling so crappy because I'm over-methylating? So I started fiddling with the levels of methylation. The methylated Bs I was taking didn't make any difference. I did what we tell you all not to do, which was, I went on the internet and looked for I have chronic fatigue, and I got Dr. So-and-so's magic red juice, not juice, but dried berry stuff that's going to give you the energy of a 3-year-old. And, I'm like, what's going on? So I tried a bunch of things that were guaranteed to make me feel fabulous, and none of them worked, and I was getting sicker and sicker. And then I randomly I had a couple of huge trees in my yard, in my forest, that my builder, the guy who was remodeling my kitchen for me, said, if they fall over, it's going to slice your house in half. You need to get those taken care of. So he introduced me to a gentleman called Josh, who has forever been known as Josh the Tree Dude. And so Josh the Tree Dude comes over to assess my trees. And we got talking about our respective weird medical things. He had Lyme disease. He had a whole bunch of problems from all the vaccinations he had when he was in the army. He had a whole slew of stuff going on, none of which the medical profession had really been able to figure out. He'd actually been so chronically fatigued that he hadn't really been able to work for 4 years, and he was just struggling with life. And his wife too, she was lovely. She came and we stood in my yard and we talked about the various things that we tried over our various journeys that had helped us. I talked to him about far infrared sauna, and so we were swapping notes. That in itself didn't help me. But about a month after I met Josh, he called me one day and he said, "Hey, I've been to see this new practitioner and she did all this testing on me, and can I come over, or can my wife and I come over? Can we show you the test results?" So he came over and he showed me these test results of all the things that she'd found, the toxins that she'd found, the bacteria, viral infections, Lyme co-infections. I mean, just like this enormous like pile of things that were at toxic levels within his body. And I was like, wow. And because I'm a bit of a detective, I was like, wow, I just want to have all the testing done just to see what's going on with me. Didn't think anything more about it because I still thought that the problems I was experiencing were something to do with the MTHFR, the genetic mutation that I have. But about a month after that, I had become so ill that I called Josh and I said, "What was that lady's name? Because I'm desperate." And of course, I just moved to Connecticut, so I didn't have an MD, I didn't have an ND, I didn't have anybody, but I was getting more sick than I could cope with.
I was going to say that must have really added many more layers of anxiety, being completely so far away from where where your home had been and people you knew and support systems and all the rest of it.
Right. So, and that you just reminded me, there were so many of these weird symptoms that I got that I forgot a big one. About 10 days when all the other symptoms started, I also started getting huge amounts of anxiety. Now, I've been depressed before I figured out how to fix my bipolar. I'd spent most of my life being depressed, but anxiety was never something that I'd struggled with. Well, all of a sudden, I moved to Connecticut and I'm awake all night and I'm having terrible anxiety, and that was new to me. And of course, because it was a brain issue, that was really terrifying to me given my bipolar status. So I also had extreme anxiety. And so I was just like, I don't know what is happening to me. And I got kind of desperate. But I didn't have a support system here because I just moved here. I knew no one. I had no doctors. I didn't even know where the hospital was. So I called Josh and I said, "What was that lady's name? I'm just going to go see her because I don't know what else to do. But, I feel like I'm dying. And I'm getting more and more sick and nothing is making sense to me and I can't work this out." So he gave me her number. I went to see her a week later and she tested me for all sorts of things and it was fascinating. But the one thing, the big thing was that we found out that I had Lyme disease. And if you know anything about Lyme disease, you'll know it's the scourge of the earth. It's an absolutely horrible, horrible thing to have. If you know anyone who's had Lyme disease or you've ever kind of bumped into it on the internet, you'll know that Lyme disease is absolutely horrible.
I do actually. A local chap to me, when it went undiagnosed for a long period of time, and yeah, he basically nearly died. So, yeah, pretty bad.
So I learned this. I learned a lot of other things too. I learned that I had pinworm. I learned that I had babesia, which is a Lyme co-infection. I learned that I had massively high toxic levels of mercury in my body. I learned that I had toxic levels of arsenic in my body. I learned, what else did I learn? There was so much. I learned I had an E. coli infection. I don't even remember all the things. There was about 20 things. But the big thing was Lyme. And so I came home and I stupidly went on the internet and typed in Lyme and spent 3 days going, oh my goodness, I'm like, the end is nigh, like this thing is going to kill me. And watching the struggles that people have had Lyme for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and they still can't get any relief. A lot of doctors don't even believe Lyme is a thing. A lot of insurance companies won't pay for any Lyme treatments because Lyme's not a thing. There's just antibiotics are diagnosing it is really, really, really difficult because a lot of the tests give a double negative. So even if you can persuade a doctor to test you for Lyme, it often comes back negative, even though you have it. Lyme is a very, very, very tricky bacteria. So there's, and then even if you do find a doctor who will look at you and take you seriously and test for Lyme, and you test positive for Lyme, antibiotics are generally now being thought of as ineffective, particularly long term. So Lyme disease is really, it's not good for lots of reasons. And I started reading about the struggles that all these people had. You know, there are people who are completely debilitated, in wheelchairs, can't work. I mean, it's just horrible. And so I spent 3 days thinking, well, I should start writing goodbye notes to people because I was just overwhelmed by everything that I was learning about Lyme. And but I also learned the symptoms that I started out this podcast sharing with you are absolutely classic Lyme symptoms. Those are all the classic things. There were some things that I didn't get. A lot of people get tinnitus, ringing in the ears with Lyme. There's a lot of other things, but the things I did have were classic Lyme symptoms. Even the anxiety, because Lyme is famous for causing neurological problems. Depression, anxiety. Lyme actually stops you sleeping. And I know this is going to sound really weird, but I have heard it corroborated by naturopaths and plenty of Lyme sufferers that Lyme is, your sleep will be particularly disrupted around a full moon.
Oh, really?
Because the moon, because Lyme is a living organism, it's a bacteria, it's actually affected by the phases of the moon. So if you're ever in a situation where you can't sleep around a full moon, you might want to look at that. So I spent 3 days convinced that, I was going to have Lyme and that my life was basically over. But then I developed a treatment plan with the specialist I had seen. And so we found out I tested positive for Lyme on July 25th. And she started treating me homeopathically and with certain herbal supplements. And so I started that protocol. And on October the 1st, when I was retested, I was completely free of Lyme. And so that was just a hair over 2 months. And I cannot tell you the difference in how I feel, my energy levels. I'm sleeping straight through for 8-9 hours. My migraines have stopped completely. I have energy all day. I don't need to sleep during the day anymore. My anxiety, it hasn't completely gone, but it's 95% gone. My neck pain has resolved. My body odor has gone. My feet don't stink.
Not Stinky McStinkton.
I don't stink anymore. So not only did I test now negative for Lyme, but I feel completely different to how I felt, 2 months. So it wasn't just the test, but the symptoms also went away.
There was a real process though, wasn't there? I mean, I remember following this as it was happening, and there were things you had to do before you could start the elimination protocol, weren't there? You had to build up your strength in different areas before you could start taking the stuff that would start killing it off.
I think I could have. I believe I'm right in saying that I could have immediately started taking the homeopathic remedies to kill the bacteria. But Sheila, the lady of the name of the lady that was helping me, she wanted to make sure, because I had been so ill, she wanted to make sure that my body was ready for what they call the die-off. So if you've ever had candida or any other kind of bacteria, that kind of thing, you know that they get a bit peed off when you kill them, and they release a bunch of toxins, and that can actually make you feel really, really, really horrible. So she wanted to. So we did. The first month was more about supporting my liver, supporting my gut, supporting all my processes, so that when we started killing the Lyme, that my body could actually cope with it better, and that I wouldn't become really, really ill from all the toxic die-off. So the first month was kind of building my body up, and then the second month was when we actually added the homeopathic remedies that actually killed the Lyme, was the second month. But by October 1, I tested negative for Lyme. But I can tell you just by the way I feel that something is radically different. And the only thing I did was the Lyme treatment. So I also, I do want to point out that in the interim, after I first started working with Sheila, who's a homotoxicologist, after I started working with Sheila, I also found a naturopath, because I was still at that point, before I found out I had Lyme, I was still working on the notion that it was the MTHFR, this genetic wrinkle, that was causing the problem. So I'd made an appointment to see a naturopath who specializes in genetics. And I saw Sheila and we started on the Lyme thing, but I kept the appointment with the naturopath because I did want to make sure that I was not over or under methylating. She ran a whole slew of blood tests and included the test for Lyme. So I did have the regular blood test for Lyme, and that was positive too. So I knew for sure that Sheila's homotoxicology was a thing, because I had the blood test too, and also was tested after the treatment. So I now know for sure that I now do not have Lyme, because I was tested again. So one of the things that I saw a lot in the last 3 months, I've studied a lot about Lyme, because I just became aware that there are tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people who are struggling with Lyme and not getting any help. They've tried everything, they're getting sicker. And so I've become very, very interested in doing what I can to help people. In a lot of the Facebook groups and forums that I joined when I first found out I had Lyme, I noticed that a lot of people were saying, you need to be on the keto diet, all you need to do, you just need to eat keto, and then, you'll kill the Lyme. So one of the things that I really is important that I shared with you, Daisy, in this forum, and I'm very grateful for you giving me the opportunity, is because keto is magical, and keto will really, really help with the symptoms of Lyme, because it essentially what happens is the Lyme goes into remission because you're not feeding it, because you're not giving it any sugars and you're not giving it any carbs. But that doesn't kill the Lyme. The Lyme bacteria is kind of special. It can actually change its own DNA, and it can go into there's this sticky substance called biofilm, And Lyme will simply, when it doesn't have optimum environment for growing and creating chaos, it can actually turn into cyst form and just basically, just lie there not doing anything. But you still have it. It's just in a different form and it's not causing chaos. So what happens typically if you start eating a ketogenic diet when you have Lyme is that a lot of your symptoms will go away. And a lot of people mistakenly think that the Lyme has gone because the symptoms have gone. But while keto is magical at reducing the symptoms, which is brilliant because the symptoms are awful, and if you can get rid of most of the symptoms while you're actually killing the Lyme, that's awesome.
Exactly. That's what's causing you the problems, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's the symptoms that's causing you the problems. But
Right. But I just want to make sure people understand that you're just holding it at bay with keto. You're not actually killing the Lyme. You're not actually getting rid of the Lyme. So keto, in the same way as for me, treating my bipolar, keto on its own was not enough. I also needed the methylated B vitamins. For Lyme disease, keto is not enough. Keto is brilliant because it can reduce the symptoms dramatically, which is so helpful because you feel so ill. But you still need to kill the bacteria because that bacteria is going to stay in your body in cyst form until you do so. So there's a lot of misinformation about how keto will cure Lyme. On its own, it will not. It'll definitely help, but it won't kill it. So I just want to encourage people who have Lyme or think they have Lyme or know someone who has Lyme, keto is absolutely the way to go for managing symptoms, but you still need to find a way to kill the bacteria so that it's gone. So that was my Lyme story.
Yeah, you didn't do that with antibiotics, did you? Because I know, that is, as you were saying earlier, it's not a good treatment, but that, logically that sounds like it would be the treatment because to kill bacteria, you use antibiotics, but it's not a very good treatment in general because I know some people do treat it that way.
Some people do, but the studies that I've been reading suggest that it works. It might work short term. A lot of people have been on a lot of antibiotics for a long time and still it hasn't, because as I mentioned, the Lyme spirochetes can actually turn into cysts and then they become resistant to the bacteria, to the antibiotics. And also they bury themselves in this sticky stuff called biofilm. So the antibiotics aren't actually even getting to them. So a lot of people with Lyme have taken all the antibiotics even for years, but then when the Lyme wakes up, as it were, you still have the Lyme because they're protected by the biofilm, they're in a cyst form, and they become resistant to the antibiotics. So I read there's a growing amount of research out there that suggests that long term, unless you catch your Lyme in like the first week, which most people don't do, antibiotics are simply not, they're not effective for killing the Lyme. I personally, if you heard my last chat with Daisy, I think I mentioned that one of the things that MTHFR mutation gives me, as well as the inability to methylate, which means that I can't use B vitamins in their normal form. One of the other things that the MTHFR people struggle with is we have a very reduced ability to detox. So while, and a lot of people will say, you don't need to detox, you've got a liver, that's what your liver does. That's true if your liver's working properly. So MTHFR people have a very reduced ability to detox. I am one of those people. So I have always struggled with antibiotics, in part because once I take them, my body cannot clear them out. And so I've had a lot of allergic reactions, and I've had a lot of weird reactions to antibiotics, and they've actually ended up making me iller rather than better. So if I can stay away from antibiotics, if I can find another way, I always do. And the antibiotics that they use for Lyme are really heavy duty because Lyme is really, really difficult to clear. So I wanted to avoid the whole antibiotics thing if I possibly could. And with Sheila's help, we cleared it without the use of antibiotics and also without a great deal of cost. The treatment was incredibly cheap. And it was incredibly fast. And, but keto certainly helped in the management of the symptoms. But I do want to be clear again that keto alone will not get rid of Lyme. It may put it into remission, which is why you think that it's fixed, but you still need to go and get some help to kill the bacteria. So that's my Lyme story. It's been an exciting year.
Yeah.
I moved to Connecticut the first week of March. There was 2 feet of snow on the ground. So I did not contract Lyme disease in March because, one, there was 2 feet of snow and ticks don't bounce around in 2 feet of snow. But also I wasn't outside because there was 2 feet of snow. So when I look back over the years and think very hard about when weird symptoms started happening, we believe that I actually got the Lyme when I was in Georgia 6 years ago. So we think that's when I was bitten by the tick.
Long time. That is the only way you get Lyme. I mean, it's everyone says you get Lyme from a tick.
It's being bitten by an infected tick.
And you don't always know. I mean, sometimes when they get you and they can leave a ring mark around, sometimes, they get and they're there and they're there because there's a tick you've got to remove. But I mean, you don't always know, do you? Well, as you know, you don't know that you've always known that you've been bitten by a tick.
I would say that most people have no idea that they were bitten. I think the statistics are about 50% of people never get the rash. It's a bullseye around the tick bite. 50% of people get that. The other 50% don't ever get it. I didn't get it because I would have noticed it.
I've been knowingly bitten because the thing is attached and I've had to remove it at least 2 or 3 times since I've been in France. And yeah, I've never had that ring around it.
Well, you have to remember that only 50%. So it's only the girl ticks. Like the boy ticks don't carry it. So if you're bitten by a boy, you're good.
It's the females that are the problem. Typical.
If you're bitten by a girl, only whatever, I don't remember the number, but only 50% of the girls are actually infected because the infection starts with mice, not with ticks. So the ticks get it from the mice. Only 50% of females are infected. So if you look at the whole tick population, 50% of boys, then 50% of the girls aren't infected, then it has to be at the right time of year. So, it's kind of like spring through fall. So all of these things have to be aligned for you to actually get Lyme disease from a tick bite. It's not like every tick you're going to end up with Lyme disease. But there's no way that I was bitten by a tick in March with 2 feet of snow because there are no ticks and also I wasn't outside. So, but we think I got the Lyme in Georgia 6 years ago. And then we believe that it went into remission because that was right around the time I started eating very low carb. And then 3 years later, I went fully keto. So although I got the Lyme, I immediately went into remission, which is why I didn't have any symptoms. And then it woke up in the first week of March. And that's when, this chaos broke out. And it's ironic to me, though, that I found out after I had just moved down the road from Lyme, Connecticut, which is where Lyme where Lyme was first given its name. That's why it's called Lyme, because it was discovered in Lyme.
Right. Gosh, that is a coincidence, isn't it?
And I now live there. So that was just like weird. So it was like the universe is just like, okay, you've had this thing for 6 years and you're not paying attention. So I'm going to move you to Lyme, Connecticut. And so maybe, and then I'm going to introduce you to Josh the tree dude. And so that's the only way I can get you to pay attention to what I've been trying to tell you. So that is my story with Lyme disease. And it's like becoming my second fiddle to my cure your own bipolar is you can cure Lyme disease, and you can do it quickly and cheaply, and you can do it without antibiotics. And I say all that because that's me. So one more thing that the medical profession really seems to struggle with, there is another way. So I want to give people hope that, if they have Lyme or have an illness that they're getting diagnosis for, but treatments aren't being effective. If any of the symptoms I described at the beginning sound like you may, but you haven't had a Lyme diagnosis, you may want to get that checked out. Lyme is known as the great imitator because Lyme looks like a lot of other things. So Lyme looks like chronic fatigue. Lyme can look like MS. Lyme can look like fibromyalgia. So a lot of people who are diagnosed with illnesses like that actually end up finding out, because the treatments don't work, they're not getting any better. They go to see a different specialist, they find a different doctor. A lot of those people end up discovering that they actually have Lyme, and it just looks like all those other things. So there's a lot of people walking around who have Lyme who have been consistently misdiagnosed, but that's why the treatments are not helping them, because they're not being treated for Lyme. And until you get rid of the bacteria, you're never gonna stop getting the symptoms. So this is my new soapbox, Lyme.
Yes, and it's definitely something that it's just being aware of these things, isn't it? I mean, if you're somewhere where you know that there's a tick problem. I mean, I know that there's an issue with ticks where I live. I predominantly, it's something that actually I don't really think about it for myself. It's more keeping them off my animals. But it's just being aware, isn't it? And if you've known you've been bitten by a tick, particularly, is something to keep in the back of your mind. But when you were talking about that, is the ring mark around the bite something that is indicative of Lyme, or just something that happens to some people with being bitten by a tick?
No, that is Lyme.
I see. Right. Okay. I was thinking it was something that could just come with a tick bite per se, but that is Lyme. I see. Right.
Yeah. If you do get the bullseye rash, you have been infected.
I see. So that's where, when you mentioned earlier about if you can treat it early, it's going to be a lot easier to deal with. So that's why people tell you to look out for the bullseye rash if you know you've been bitten by a tick, because then you can get that really early diagnosis. Right.
If you see the rash,
I see.
You need to get to a doctor. If you have been bitten by a tick and you know it, and then you get the rash, go to the doctor. If you've been bitten by a tick and you don't get the rash, this is the problem. You may or may not be infected, because only 50% of people who are infected get the rash. So that's the first thing that makes it so difficult. If you get the rash, for sure you're infected. If you don't get the rash, you could still be infected. Just I didn't get a rash. Because it's very, very it looks like, the Target logo here. It looks like a bullseye. It's very, very, it's not small, it's big, and it looks like nothing else. So if you have that, you would have noticed it. There's no way that you could get that rash and not know you had it. The other thing, of course, is that I don't think people realize how tiny ticks are. There's particularly and I forget, not larva, I forget what the term is, but a baby tick. There's a special name for a baby tick, and I can't remember what it is. But even the adult ticks are about the size of sesame seeds. So you can miss, particularly, if you're like me and you have long hair, you could miss a tick on the back of your neck. It's the size of a sesame seed. But the baby ticks are like poppy seeds.
Yes, they're tiny. And I've seen that they're quite often attached. Quite often when I've taken ticks off the animals, and there's the bigger tick, and then there's a tiny little tick on it, and you're right, they're tiny, they're poppy seed size, and you'd never know that was on you. Yeah,
it's like a poppy seed, so right,
you'd miss that easily,
right, and they like to get in they can get between your toes.
Yeah, they like crevices, don't they?
So you're never going to notice a poppy seed. You're never going to notice a poppy seed in between your toes necessarily. Or, as you say, us girls, or, with long hair on the back of our necks, or actually on our scalp, you're never going to notice a poppy seed. So it's actually, and they like to get in folds. So, in armpit folds and backs of your knees and, dark, sweaty places like that. This is why people miss it, because the baby ticks, which are also the ones that carry the infection, are the size of poppy seeds. Easy to miss. I think a lot of people, and me being one of them, was like, oh, a tick, that's like the size of a fly. I'll never miss that. I mean, I'm okay. I'm safe.
And of course, they're only on for a certain length of time until they're basically engorged with blood, and then they fall off anyway. So, easy to miss.
So the good news is that if it's an adult tick, the adult tick, or any ticks, but the adults you can actually have a hope of seeing because they're bigger, but they actually have to be attached to you for more than 24 hours before they will start to transmit the infection. So if you notice a tick, you do have a window where if you remove it before 24 hours, they will not have transmitted any infection. So you do have leeway, but you got to notice that the tick's on you in the first place. And that can be super hard because, especially with the babies, they're just so small. So, but I'm incredibly grateful. It just, the stars all aligned for me. It was kind of magical that I had the builder I did, who knew the tree dude, who had Lyme, who introduced me to the homotoxicologist, and that she was like 20 minutes from my new home. It was kind of magical, and I'm incredibly grateful for that chain of events that led to this resolution. And it was kind of magical, how my bipolar resolved, how, I met all the right people at the right time. So I now feel like I need to start talking about this, because most people don't end up, their lives don't align so that they magically meet all the right people to point them to, someone that can help them with whatever's going on. And Lyme is a very, very, very difficult disease, infection. So that's why I wanted to talk about it. There's so many people suffering from Lyme, and who've been suffering from Lyme for a long, long time, or people that are suffering from what has been misdiagnosed, people suffering from MS, people suffering from fibromyalgia, people suffering from chronic fatigue, that actually isn't any of those things. It's actually Lyme that is looking like them. So this is not intended to panic people, but if you have been diagnosed with something and you are not responding to treatment, then this is something, and any of the symptoms I described might sound like you might just want to go and get that checked out, because you may actually be trying to treat the wrong thing. And also, if you do have Lyme and you've had Lyme for, a year or more, then I highly recommend you seeking out a homotoxicologist and looking at a different route. Because as I say, I found out I had it on July 25th. October 1st, when I was retested, I am now clear of Lyme. But I know that I'm clear of Lyme because my symptoms are 5% now of what they were. Obviously, with things like these kind of long-term infections, your symptoms don't stop overnight. But I am feeling better and better every day. And I would say I'm pretty close to being back to normal. My sleep is absolutely back to normal. The migraines have almost completely gone, and most of the other symptoms have resolved. So I just want to encourage people, if you have Lyme, or you know someone with Lyme, there is another way. And if you have anything else that sounds like similar to this, but it's been diagnosed as something else, but you're not getting relief from the treatment that's being given you, this might be something that you want to look at.
Yes, it's one of those things where you go to a doctor and like you were saying, you were fortunate in finding the people who would listen to you, but people so often just go unlistened to. We hear this with people with thyroid symptoms and where just because it won't show up on a test or it doesn't show up how, a doctor wants to see the results showing up on a test, but you've got all the symptoms. And I do think it's important. And, thank you for sharing your story, because it empowers people to say, I don't care what your tests are saying. I don't care what the typical medical journal is saying about it. I still have these symptoms. They're not getting better. And I want you to help me do something about it. And it is empowering when you hear these stories about people who've done just that. And it's something you can go armed with and say, look, somebody else has treated it this way. Please just listen to me or point me to somebody else who will listen and help me get rid of this, because I want to be well.
And I think you've got to be really, hardcore about if a doctor doesn't listen to you, if a doctor doesn't do what you're asking them to do, get a new doctor, get a naturopath, get a functional medicine doctor, find a homotoxicologist. Well, if you have Lyme, I would recommend that everybody finds a homotoxicologist, because this process for me has been incredibly fast, incredibly easy, and incredibly cheap. And if you've had Lyme for any length of time, all of those things will be music to your ears.
Cheap doesn't sound like something that often goes hand in hand with medical treatment in the States, from what I know about medical treatment in America.
Exactly. And it's the same as my bipolar, Daisy. I mean, I was spending $1,500 a month on medication to keep me stable. And that wasn't fixing my bipolar. That was just keeping me stable, i.e. stopping me from hurting myself. $1,500 a month. I now spend about $50 a month on the methylated B vitamins that don't just keep me stable, they keep me completely symptom-free. And I don't go sideways every 6 months because I have to up the dose or any of that, which is what I was doing with the medications they had me on with bipolar. So my experience with bipolar is that it's cheap and easy to fix. The methylated B vitamins combined with a ketogenic diet. And in the same way, I have discovered that combating Lyme disease can be cheap and easy and fast. When I do want to give a caveat. My homotoxicologist said to me that if I talk to people about this, it is important to note that people may not get the same result in the same time as I did. I think the fact that I had been keto for so long helped, because the Lyme wasn't going completely crazy. It had been in remission for a really long time. But people who have had chronic Lyme for, 5, 10, 15 years, and they may have other co-infections that I didn't have, the process could take longer. So just because this process took me 2 months, from start to finish, doesn't mean it's going to go that way for all of you. But you absolutely, the end is in sight, and it's not going to bankrupt you or, cause you an enormous amount of suffering. A lot of traditional Lyme treatments will cause large amounts of what they call herxing, which is the die-off, is the allergic reaction, if you like, to the die-off. I got almost zero herxing using the natural homeopathic remedies and supplements that my homotoxicologist gave me. So that was another benefit, was that I had almost zero herxing, which meant that even the process of killing the Lyme was not awful, which for a lot of people using antibiotics or more traditional methods find that they literally can't function while they're going through the process because the herxing reaction is so horrible. I didn't get that either. So I just want to encourage you, like I did when we did the bipolar episode, is, if you're not getting better, or if you have things that nobody knows what to do with, or if something doesn't feel right, just be your own detective and don't take no for an answer, and don't think that there's only one way to treat these things, because in my experience, that has not been true. We have since found, once we cleared the Lyme, I have now found that I have Epstein-Barr virus, and I also have systemic candida. And the reason we didn't find that in the first place was because the biofilm that is created, the Epstein-Barr and the candida were kind of hiding in there underneath the Lyme. So once we cleared the Lyme, then we could see the Epstein-Barr and the candida. So I'm now being...
Oh, goody. More things.
But so I'm now taking homeopathic remedies to clear the Epstein-Barr and the candida. But I have no doubt that that's just, a process. I also found out, we're probably coming to the end here, but I also, maybe for another episode, I also found out from visiting my new naturopath that I have drug-induced lupus. And that is interesting to me because drug-induced lupus is typically caused not by drugs, not by recreational drugs. That's not something I've ever done in any form. But drug-induced lupus is normally caused either by an antibiotic or by an anti-seizure medication. And the bipolar medication I was on was an anti-seizure medication. So not only did Big Pharma not help to clear up my health issues, but
gave you a little bonus.
Also gave me drug-induced lupus. So I'm also dealing with that. Lupus is an inflammatory disease. It's a autoimmune where your body starts to attack itself because it doesn't even know what's what anymore. So right now we're working on clearing out all the livestock. So the remaining parasites, the candida, the Epstein-Barr, and I still have one Lyme co-infection left, Babesia. So we're working on killing all of that. And then we have to get rid of the biofilm, that sticky stuff that covers everything and makes things able to hide. And then when we've done that, then we'll be working on the getting rid of the drug-induced lupus. And I don't know what that's going to look like yet, but I'm as confident as I can be that we're going to get all of that stuff resolved and quickly and cheaply. So I'm super, super happy, but I'm super, super grateful to the chain of events that have led me to where I am, because I honestly don't know where I would be now if I hadn't met Josh and Josh hadn't introduced me to the homotoxicologist. I'm not actually sure what state I would be in. So I'm incredibly grateful. And I do feel compelled to share my journey broadly, because there are so many people suffering from Lyme, those who know they have it, and a lot of people who don't even realize they have it.
And anyone who's sitting there wanting to know a bit more about Sheila and what she does, we're going to be talking to her next week. So we will find out a bit more about. She has a fascinating story in her own right, but she's also going to be just explaining a little bit more about what went on with you, which I think will be very useful.
Sheila, not surprisingly, it won't surprise anyone to know that Sheila is like my favourite person on earth right now, because I
yes,
literally feel like maybe I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her help and her expertise in getting this Lyme taken care of, and, you know, all the other things that she's helping me take care of now. So I am super excited that she was open to coming on your podcast, Daisy, so that people could hear about it. And I can't talk about the science or why it works or what it even all is. I just know that it does work, because I know, you know, the state I was in a few months ago versus how I am now, using the protocols that Sheila did with me. So I'm super excited. And she does have, her personal story is remarkable. And I'm super excited for people to hear about her, but also hear about what it is she does in the realm of homotoxicology that is helping so many people to get to the bottom of root cause, which anyone who knows me knows I'm all about the root cause. I'm fed up with the Band-Aids. She's helping change lives, and I think people need to know about that.
Yes, and like we were discussing before we started the podcast, that many of the people, by the time they get to her, they're really at their wits' end. They've spent a fortune and they're just so sick and have just had enough. So yes, she must get a lot of satisfaction from helping people like you come back from that.
She does, and I'm super excited that she agreed to come and be on your podcast. She's gonna, between you and her, you're going to help a load of people, and that always makes me happy.
Well, and, you know, thank you for sharing your story, because I know it's not easy often sharing all these things when we're very vulnerable and we're feeling, you know, at our lowest points. But it really does help people, other people out there who, you know, maybe have similar stories, or something you say just resonates with them and leads them to go and get checked out and heal themselves. So it, like you say, it's important, isn't it? Just to talk about these things openly on a forum where as many people as possible could hear about it.
And I think Lyme disease is another one of those things that so many people don't know about it, and the medical profession is mostly clueless about Lyme disease. It does tend to be, although it's spreading rapidly in the US, so it's not just the northeast corner now. They have Lyme in Colorado, they have Lyme all over the place. So it's growing, and it's a problem. And the vast majority of doctors do not have the knowledge or equipped to deal with it, because most of them don't learn what it is, because it used to be kind of a thing that was just limited to the northeast corner of the US. Now it's all over, and they're not equipped to deal with it. And their best line of defense is antibiotics, which we're learning are typically not very effective. But also the testing is terrible. There's a lot of people who have Lyme who are being tested and being told that it's a negative result when they actually do have Lyme, because the testing that they have currently is so unreliable. So there's, you know, I really, really want to talk about Lyme openly, because it is becoming a really, really, really big problem. Here in the US, for sure, it's becoming a big problem. And if I can help to get ahead of it, then that's what I would like to do.
Well, thank you for that. And we will have links in the show notes where people can find out a bit more, where you talk about it on your website, and you've got a YouTube video that you did the other day with Sheila. So there's more information that people can go and find out about after listening to this. Well, perhaps you could leave us with a top tip for the listeners. I'm sure we've kind of had quite a few tips along the way, but a top tip to round off.
I think maybe this was the same top tip I had the last time, but really is just be your own detective. Really just take note of what's going on with your body. If you have any weird symptoms, like keep a note of them. Track, if you've got anything, if you've moved, think about allergies. If you really think critically about if you have new symptoms, think back to what changed that might be the cause of them. I think that would be the thing that has got me through both taking care of my bipolar and now taking care of my Lyme, was applying critical thinking to, okay, what changed, and eliminating things so that you kind of end up with what's left, which will help you to know where to go to get help. And for some of you, that may be that you just happen to be listening to this podcast at the right time. That all counts. But I think all of us really have to start being our own detectives when it comes to our health. There's nothing like taking note of what's happening to your body in a way that only you can really know. That is very, very powerful knowledge for moving forward and figuring out what is going on so that you can find the right person to help you heal and get on with your life.
And I think that also actually does come quite naturally to people on keto. I think they've got into that practice, improving their own health with the way they eat and finding out why it works, finding out the science behind it. So I think it, would come fairly naturally.
I think generally when you've been keto for a while and you're no longer eating all the junk food and you're no longer eating all the crap and you're no longer eating all the chemicals, I think your body, once it's kind of cleaned itself out, your body becomes a lot more sensitive. So when something does happen, when you do accidentally eat something that's gluten in, you might suddenly go, oh, wow, maybe I was allergic to that because now I'm getting a reaction, whereas before I never used to. So I think keto makes it very much easier for you to listen to your body because the layers of crap have been cleared out, if that makes sense.
Yes, no, it absolutely does, actually. I've often thought about it that way, that you can it helps you tune in. It helps you tune in to all sorts of things like, satiety signals and all sorts of things. So, yes, it makes sense that it just sensitizes your body to things and makes you more aware when something's wrong. So, yeah, listen.
So keep doing that.
That's right.
Keto helps for a lot of things, but I think it really does. Keto really helps you to become in tune with your body. So don't, even if it turns out that keto wasn't the magic fix for whatever it is that ails you, it will surely help in a lot of other ways that maybe you might not appreciate. So even though keto is not the answer for killing Lyme disease, it really helped me keep the symptoms at bay, and it really helped me to keep my body at a level where it could much more easily discern what was going on.
And fight it. Well, thank you for sharing all that with us today. It's been a pleasure, as always, to have a good old chinwag with you.
I hope it's helpful. But, even if it's only helped one person, it will be worth it, because I wouldn't wish the living hell that is Lyme disease on anybody. So I hope if you know someone, if you don't suffer, but you know someone who does, or the symptoms sound like maybe something that someone's suffering with, please share this podcast with them so that they can evaluate for themselves whether this is something that they should follow up on. Just share it widely, share it with everyone you know who may be suffering, so that we can together we can help more people.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I mentioned towards the end of the podcast that Sheila Reid would be coming on the show next week. Due to scheduling issues, we need to push that date back a bit, but I will be recording with her soon, so look out for her story and some more information about Carrie's treatments soon. To get the resources and links from the show, please go to ketowomanpodcast.com. Are you my next extraordinary woman? Maybe you've got an idea for a show, a topic you want to hear about. Let me know how I can tickle your earbuds by dropping me a line at daisy@ketowomanpodcast.com. If you fancy joining me on this exciting adventure and want to help me create new episodes, please go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/ketowoman, or simply hit the support button on the Keto Woman podcast website. It's thanks to the two keto dudes that I'm hosting this podcast, so please consider heading to their Patreon page at patreon.2keto.com and help them bring you more podcasts like this one. Please help other people hear about and find this podcast by reviewing the show on iTunes and Facebook. Every star and review really does help. It doesn't go unnoticed by me, the people who regularly like, share and comment on my posts. Your support means the world to me. Thank you. This week's end quote was suggested by Katie Kelleher and is from Dumbledore in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. Happiness can be found in the darkest of times, if one only remembers to turn on the light. Bye-bye, Keto Lovelies.